into this mix.
Hey everyone, this is Derrick Broze with the Conscious Resistance Network and Activist Post. I'm here at the Free Your Mind Conference in Philadelphia, and I'm getting the pleasure of speaking with Mr. David Whitehead. How are you doing, brother?
Good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good. It's been 3 days now of interesting talks, and I enjoy the depth of conversation, the diversity of thought, but really what gets me excited is the type of content that you're bringing in, and others here as well. The stuff that focuses on the solutions, and solutions in the sense of spiritual development, personal development, self-help, but on a deeper level. And of course, your message does it in a way that incorporates martial arts, which I think is really great as well. And to see these concepts going into different particular fields, we each have our own way to filter the message, and the way you do that is great. But before we get into that, I want to give my audience a chance to know a little bit more about you and your channel and some of the podcasts you do. So just go ahead and let everybody know what your work is based on and what your sites are and all that.
Right. Well, my personal channel and the work that I do is, you can find it on YouTube if you just look up Truth Warrior. And then the podcast that I've teamed up with Michael Tessarian on is called the Unslaved podcast, and the website is unslaved.com. And the approach that I take to the work that I do was kind of a very personal approach of how I helped rehabilitate myself from growing up, living through a lot of traumatic experiences, and really in a very insecure kind of mindset. And I know a lot of young people go through this naturally, but when you add some extra things into the mix, it can be really difficult. And so I was always in a place where I was sort of forced, kind of against my will, to be very self-sufficient. Like I was, my mother was very sick, my father was working shift work, we were moving around a lot, there was a lot of stuff going on, and I was always a very timid child. But I never felt like it was my natural state of being, it was just because of what I was experiencing. So when I started, I was watching shows like the Ninja Turtles and watching like martial art demonstrations and going to events, and just it would just keep popping up randomly for me. Or I'd be with my parents at the library and I would just walk past some book by Bruce Lee or something. It would just be like random, and it was just in my subconscious. And what attracted me to that was just that air of confidence. Not arrogance. It was like this nice balance of just like these people that I was seeing. They weren't trying to push themselves on anybody. They weren't trying to rise above anybody. They just seemed very inspiring to me. Yeah. And I felt like, what's this martial arts thing? It just looks so powerful. And so I eventually was trying to get my parents to get me involved in something. And at the time, they were very much about, well, it looks kind of violent. We don't really know about it. We don't want you to be involved with something like that. I just think they didn't understand it. And I kind of was forced to do it on my own. And so I would go to the library and sneak out a couple books and eventually start reading about it. And I came into the philosophy of it first. And the philosophy was very much about, being a strong individual, being capable, mastering your fear, mastering your body, learning about your mind and how it works, achieving your potential. And it was all right there. And then finally, I was training kind of by myself, on my own, and eventually my parents said, well, let's just get him involved in something. At least he'll have some supervision and it'll be good. And so I started my journey in karate, and then I've been living a life of training martial arts. But I always knew that there was a deeper layer, there was a more esoteric layer to the philosophy from these various warrior traditions. And not just coming from the East, but also from the West and from all parts of the world and all times in history. There's been this function in society of the warrior. And so the warrior to me was very much like an archetype. It was like everybody in their mind, if you look at the work of people like Carl Jung and many others that have talked about this concept of the archetype, there are many archetypes that we all sort of have imprinted in our being in a way, and that make us human, and that have different functions. And when I was growing up, I started taking an interest also in physical health, because I was training a lot and competing in tournaments, and so that became a natural progression. I was like, you got to be healthy, you got to be strong, you got to eat the right foods. And they looked at your body as your temple and all this, right? And I'm like, well, in order to have a healthy body, you need a functioning immune system that can ward off any kind of outside attack by parasites or toxins or whatever. And of course, in our world, we live in a very toxin-ridden environment in many ways. And so when I looked at this warrior archetype and I did this research, I started to realize that this archetype was like an immune system for your consciousness, for your mind. It was like the warrior's mind. And I read really deeply into the works of people like Bruce Lee and Morihei Ueshiba and Gichin Funakoshi, Jigoro Kano, and all these founders of these various martial arts. And what separated them from many of the Western academies of martial arts was that they were like, this is a way of life. This is a way of becoming a better person. This is a way of a spiritual practice. And this is an essential function in society. The warrior is the one that stands when nobody else will stand. The warrior is the one that represents courage. The warrior doesn't have to be someone that takes up a sword physically. It can be a warrior that is there even using words and using influence to try to create change in that society. Mm-hmm. So the warrior was someone that stood, and that just, it resonated with me. And for some reason, I was always into the knights and armor and history and warrior. And I think at first my parents were thinking, why is he always into this violent stuff? But it was because they didn't understand that, to me, it wasn't about the fact that warriors are typically involved in combat and it turns out to be about war. It was more about what they represented as this archetype. And so I thought, well, how do we take the best elements of warrior cultures? Because there's many elements that are not cohesive for a peaceful society. There's many negative elements. So how do we take the best elements of these philosophies, and how can we make it relevant to our modern time? Mm-hmm. And when I started compiling it, I kept finding more and more and more. And then my own life became evidence of this. That when you learn how to face your fear, when you learn how to live a life of courage, when you learn how to respect your body and your mind, to learn how to expand your physical capabilities and master movement, but also to realize that your mind is in a state of movement. And if you don't learn how to understand those cycles of your mind and how to master that, your mind can overtake you. And when I was in my teens, I was riddled with depression and anxiety. My parents they just did what they thought was best. They took me to see a psychologist. And of course, they put me into a psych ward at the age of, 17 years old, confused kid, right? And they're like, let's put him in a psych ward with a bunch of legitimately mentally ill people, and let's give him, medicine 6 times a day. And so, they put me on all kinds of stuff, Paxil and all the works to try to numb the pain, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas I was just a confused teen that was lost. And one day my karate instructor came in to visit me at the psych ward, and he said, what are you doing here? And I said, this is where I have to be. I'm lost. I don't know what to do. My parents put me here. They think it's what's best. The doctor said this. He goes, you don't need the doctor. You need to be back in the dojo. And it just kind of struck me. And I think it was literally only about a month after that I got out and I went back to training. And I continued a very disciplined approach to my training. And at the same time, I continued studying and researching. And so the combination of the physical mastery and the mental mastery of just answering questions, because knowledge is the antidote to fear, right? So I put that all together, and it drastically changed my life. And I figured, you know what? In a world like this that we're looking around in right now, with all the turmoil and the war and the suffering and the chaos, there needs to be a return of this warrior. There needs to be a return of this empowered idea of courage in the face of adversity. Because too many people look at the situation in the world and they feel disempowered. Because what can one person do, right? Whereas this philosophy was saying, you need to work on yourself. That's what you've been given to do. Even in the chaos, you need to become that eye of the tornado. You need to become a healthy white blood cell that will inspire change. And I figured, to teach youth, young people, teens, adults, to teach them this philosophy, to learn value, self-value, and to learn how to build something, to build skills, to build knowledge and expand awareness. This is the essential antioxidant that we're missing in our consciousness. You know what I mean? Just to use that metaphor. So that's kind of the long explanation of my story and where this was born. And it's kind of taken a lot of different roads ever since.
Well, I definitely appreciate that approach, because I feel like every now and then I meet other activists is not even really the right word for what it is that we're trying to do, which is to shift consciousness and help people evolve and help our species move forward. But when I meet other people who are doing this in different ways, and I feel like we're speaking the same language, just maybe in from some different angles, because the bulk of what my work is focused on is to encourage people to do that deeper level of thinking and pursuing healing. And I've always envied this and appreciated this about martial arts. I'm really interested in Aikido and a few other styles, just that there was a spiritual element to it as well, that there was, like you said, a philosophy, a whole way of life, not just the movements, even though those are obviously important, and those invoke change as well. You spoke about that. So and the other thing I can identify with is, I had a situation with drugs, but not the pharmaceutical kind forced on me. I mean, they tried that, but more with me self-medicating, getting addicted to crystal meth and going to prison, and that really is what got me into meditation and, down this path that I'm on now. So I definitely can understand and resonate with, what you've been through and the things that led you to this. I really appreciate that. So you have the YouTube channel, and it's the Truth Warrior?
Yeah, if you go to YouTube, just put in Truth Warrior, you'll find it. And I do video logs. It's kind of a spur of the moment right now when I just kind of feel in the mood. I just go through something. But I'm looking at constructing something that's more consistent. I do have a website called wayoftetruthwarrior.com where I'm trying to compile just information that people can have access to, because ever since I started talking about this, I was amazed at the response that it had, and so people want to know, where do I train, and what's the best style to train in, and where do I get this information? And so I'm trying to compile some tools for people so that they can have some practical solutions as well, just in their everyday life. And that's really what I want to move most of my work towards at this point.
And you also do the podcast with Michael Sarion. What's that? It's Unslaved, right?
Yeah, unslaved.com, and both him and I came up with that name. He had used that name years ago. He had the website, but when I brought the martial art element to him, and I said, hey, let's build something more out of this, get consistent content going out there. And then he kind of wrote a definition of unslaved, because unslaved isn't really a real word. It's a concept, and it's the idea of how do we unchain ourselves, not just from the system and the oppressive nature of what's going on. That's one element, but how do we even unslave ourselves from our own minds and our own programmed thinking and limited belief systems and all of these kinds of things. So the good thing about this concept is it has both a micro effect with the individual and a macro effect on society and the world. And so what we do is we discuss obviously a lot of Michael's work, because he was honestly the first one to really talk to me or inspire me in this world of looking at the individual first and then expanding out to the collective. And I was like, wow, he's never studied martial arts before, but he had more insight into the martial art philosophy than most of the martial artists that I had met. Awesome. So I said it was a great pairing, and we said, let's bring on very interesting guests to talk about solutions. So it's a very solution-oriented show, and it's very much centered on what you can do here right now to evolve your way of thinking and to bring about change in your own life.
Absolutely, that's more of what we need. We need more focus on the solutions. We have plenty of research, and there's still a value to that. Research. Otherwise, we wouldn't have come to the conclusions that we have.
Right.
But there definitely, is a shift. I feel like, and the desire is being met by the demand of people wanting solutions, and not so many people coming out asking where they can protest as much as how they can enrich their lives and change their own lives.
That's right.
So, what's next for you? Do you have any other upcoming talks, or what's next on your agenda?
As soon as I get back from this awesome conference, it's been a great time here, but as soon as I get back, I know I'm going to get hit with all kinds of new projects and things going to be starting up. One of the big projects we're going to be working on is we're doing a new film, a documentary film in Ireland, Scotland, and Wales area. We're trying to get that together, crowdfunded film where we're working on exposing a history of Europe and Western civilization and the whole history, the tide of history that people haven't really been told about. The ancient megalithic structures, the various histories of the Templars, and all the symbolism and just the flow of history, the alternative current that isn't really there. So that'll be a fun project. And then I know there's some other conferences and things coming up. So there's always something to keep me busy.
Awesome, man. So what's the website everybody can find you at? What's the easiest way to find you?
Wayoftetruthwarrior.com. That's my personal website. And then for the podcast, it's unslaved.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, man. Pleasure.
Appreciate it.